Welcome to the 90s. Actually, let's be more specific. Welcome young child between the ages of 7 and 15 years old to the 90s. It was a great time and age to be alive, especially if you was a gamer. Yeah, sure, characters like this no doubt dominated your playtime, let alone your bed sheets, your wallpaper and t-shirts. But today, I want to talk about those moments in gaming that made you feel a bit, naughty. I've said it before in my Earthworm Jim the Complete History video, but being rad, edgy and naughty was what it was all about. Come on, can you blame us? We were raised on such great role models as turtles that didn't follow directions, dogs that told you how they was going to brutally murder their housemates, young lads that bullied softies, and worst of all, Rolf Harris. Now taking it back to gaming, I can remember several times when I have wanted to play a game that I was probably way too young to play. Was I going to ask my mum and dad for permission? Hell no. Instead, it's best to just copy the game onto tape and label it something completely different. Dan's got a new game and it's called Rainbow Island. Haha, yeah, alright mum. How about the Amstrad horror game Nightbreed, or the shooting grannies with your bazooka simulator Death Wish 3? The kicker was my mum didn't actually care what I played, and ended up buying these games for me anyway. Lesson learned, don't copy that floppy. Anyway, long-time viewers of the show will know that after my Amstrad days, I actually got my Mega Drive, as did a couple of my close friends. One of those close friends was my neighbour Shelley, whose older sister got one game for the system that quite literally blew my mind. Are you seeing this? At 7 years old, was I really allowed to see, let alone play a game like this? Well, I wasn't gonna chance it. So like a teenager with his first porno, I sneaked it home, waited for my parents to go to sleep, plugged in my headphones, and honestly, I gave myself nightmares with this game. I am not making this up. So, join me in this complete history Halloween special as we enter West Mansion to discover exactly why it's better known as simply Splatterhouse. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. Back in 1979, Namco had already released the sequel to GB, QTQ, before releasing the sequel to Galaxian, Galaga, both of which Shigeru Yokoyama was responsible to help make. Yep, Mr. Yokoyama is quite the unsung hero all things considered, a creator that you will no doubt hear quite a lot about in future episodes, as he's also been responsible for helping create such games as Time Crisis, Rage Racer, Klonoa, and more recently, Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS and Wii U. Yep, Namco obviously loved his work so much as he continued to work at the company on many of their games. And in 1988, the cutesy looking sprites that the company was most known for fell under the dark, evil shadow that was Mr. Yokoyama's latest game. Nothing like this had ever been seen before. Yeah. Okay, so sure, gorier games do obviously exist nowadays. But sadly, most of the time, it's just a case of gore over gameplay. And you know what? The same goes for old school games too. Games like Death Race 2000 where you run over gremlins that look like people, or Barbarian with its finishing head decapitation move, or even Chiller, the gun game for the arcade where you play as a torturer, torturing helpless victims. You know what all of these games have in common? Yeah, sure, they're all gory, especially given the time and date they were released, but more importantly, they are remembered way more than they should be. Why? Because the developers were going for gore over gameplay. Below average game, below average game, below average game. And you know what? This is still going on today with games like Hatred and Postal 2. Honestly, ask yourself this. If you take away the gore, what are you left with? A very forgettable couple of games. Thankfully, there is in fact quite a few fantastic gory games that not only give you a good or even great gameplay experience, and when they finally do come around, they become quite the landmark in gaming and are remembered not just because they are gory, but more importantly because they are great games, with gore included. And thankfully, in my opinion, Splatterhouse falls nicely into the latter. Now, it's obvious that hack and slash horror movies played an important role in the creation of the Splatterhouse games, but before we get into all of that, perhaps it's best we look into the story of the game, which, thankfully, due to the TurboGrafx marketing team, actually had a 2-page advertisement disguised as a comic created to promote the game, something that long-time viewers of Slope's Game Room would be all too familiar with, as they did the exact same thing with the company's unofficial mascot for the Turbo duo, Johnny Turbo. Click here to see that episode. So, with the help of a few YouTube friends, let's take a look at the story of Splatterhouse, as told by the TurboGrafx team.
It was the mansion of Dr. West, but those who knew it better called it the Splatterhouse.
West may have been the best parapsychologist in our field, but do we have to visit his old home? It gives me the creeps.
Think of it as a school research project. Besides, the house is empty. What can happen? Jennifer, what is it?
After a fight in the dark,
What happened to me? What happened to Jennifer? My head. Something's wrong. Can't see straight. What's the matter? My face! It's covered with the terror mask!
the Terror Mask. Legend tells that the wearer is granted vast power, but can't remove it.
If I take it off, I may never get Jennifer back. Rest in pieces, you ugly slime balls! Nothing can keep me from getting Jennifer back.
I'm as good as dead unless you can help Rick rescue me in the all-new TurboGrafx 16 Splatterhouse.
Like I said, this was to advertise the TurboGrafx release, which came out after the original arcade game, and actually doesn't do the worst job in telling the story, all things considered. So after that lovely intro, the game actually starts off where the comic left off. You wake up in a disgusting looking room and, well, let's fight. You go right, jumping, kicking and punching all the evil bad guys you come up against. It's an incredibly simple concept, all things considered, and it's obvious that the main draw here is obviously the over-the-top gore found in the game. As you can see, you pick up a nice meat cleaver, quite early on actually, but then you can also find a shotgun and the classic 2x4 to name a few. I wouldn't judge you for thinking that this is just a gory game for gory's sake. I suppose all of the games in this franchise are to a degree, but thankfully with Namco behind the wheel, you'll not be surprised to hear that the game is actually damn fun to play. Always excited to see what's around the corner, or to try and pinpoint those movie references, especially in the boss levels. Don't worry, we'll get to those soon. This for me is what keeps you going through Splatterhouse. Every few years or so I do play this game through again. It still looks and plays fantastically. Every stage starts with showing you a small preview as to what lies ahead, and every level is different enough to keep you interested. Just look at this. You know exactly what's going to happen, but it still keeps you on edge. It's a really good game. Anyway, you make your way through the game, past all these infamous bad guys like this one, and this, until after about 15 minutes or so of gameplay, you make your way to Jennifer. Talk about not holding back. Now you have no choice but to kill your girlfriend. She thanks you for all you have done and dies in your arms. That does it. You then enter the house's womb. Yep, turns out the house is alive, and you try your best to kill these bubbles before they turn into monster fetuses. Destroy the centre of the womb, and you enter the final stage outside the house with everything on fire. Defeat the final boss, the spirit of the mask is destroyed, and you're free. The end. This is a game you must play, especially if you're an advocate of retro gaming. It's an absolute classic. Now, like I said before, the game was ported over to that Turbo graphic, albeit with a red mask now. They did this to prevent a lawsuit of the owners of the Friday the 13th franchise. And it was one of the main reasons that the system did as well as it did in North America, carrying that warning label. The horrifying theme of the game may be inappropriate for young children and cowards. 10 points goes to the marketing guy that came up with that.
So, you want to know the story of Splatterhouse, the new horror video game for TurboGrafx 16? They say he stalks the old haunted mansion. They say he's looking for his girlfriend. They say his only weapon against the maggot-eaten ghouls who took her is a 2x4. And you say you want to play this game? Splatterhouse. Only for the TurboGrafx 16 system from NEC.
Welcome to Splatterhouse.
PC engine Splatterhouse Namco.
The reason the game came out on the TurboGrafx as well as the FM Towns machine and this little LCD game is believed to be because of a public bust-up between Nintendo and Namco. You see, in the late 80s, Nintendo absolutely dominated the video game market and therefore could basically ask for whatever they wanted. And they did this in regard to getting third-party games on their system. They charged double the price for the cartridge itself, as well as a hefty licensing fee, forcing companies like Namco to either put the price way up or make practically no money whatsoever. The boss man at Namco was one of the first to speak about Nintendo regarding this, and said that they are committing unfair business practices. And well, Nintendo's attitude was simply, if you don't like it, go elsewhere. Hence the release of these Namco games on other systems. But that is not all, because Nintendo helped make up for what is believed to be 40% of the earnings taken in by Namco at the time. And Nintendo actually forced Namco to make a public apology for what they had said about them if they was going to continue making games for their system. Which they did. This was obviously also put in place to scare other companies that was thinking on doing the same thing. Damn Nintendo, you guys were the real monsters in this story. Anyway, with Nintendo's harsh views and guidance procedures on what was allowed to be put on their system, it was obvious that a game like Splatterhouse would just not work on the system anyway. Which brings me to probably the least well known and easily biggest diversion for the series, Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti. This game is easily one of the most obscure games I've played for the NES, and although technically it's not part of the same storyline and is more of a parody of those original games, it's still part of the Splatterhouse universe, so I've really got to mention it. This time, the story goes that Jennifer, who is alive now, is crying next to a grave. Lightning strikes, and Rick is revealed. So it's time to rejoice as our hero is back. We must have missed the point where he died. Anyway, all of this merriment obviously ends pretty quickly as lightning strikes the grave on our left and Rick's right that resurrects a pumpkin which quickly takes Jennifer away, and boom, there's your story. So, let's start the game. I think it's fair to say that the game looks very similar to other early 8-bit home computer games, and plays pretty damn well. Now I will say that this game isn't exactly groundbreaking, but it is still really good fun to play, even if it does look and play completely different to those original games. This game has some great horror humour that any punky fish wearing teenager would get a serious kick out of, and everyone else too. It has stupid as hell bosses, cutesy bad guys, and an overall charm that really would fit quite nicely into any Tim Burton movie. One of the coolest features is the fact that the game has a sort of XP system going on. As you play the game and kill the bad guys, this little number here goes up, and when it reaches the target number, then you get a little extra segment of life. Quite an unseen feature in early games like this, but a very much welcome one. Like I said, this game is a parody of the series and even ends when you defeat the massive pumpkin head, save Jennifer, and, well, it was all a movie. Looks like Rick's going to have to enter the Splatterhouse for real this time. And although sadly this was the only game in this series that was like this, and although I obviously do prefer the original games, I'm really happy with this little spin-off. And as you would expect, the next game takes it back to that original story from the one in the arcade, and is in fact set 3 months after the original, where Rick escaped the house that horrifyingly killed his girlfriend Jennifer. Rick is haunted by guilt and tormented by nightmares. Nightmares of Jennifer's screams and the infernal temptations of the mask. She doesn't have to die, Rick. Hell yes. We can save her. Talk about an awesome intro. Not just the story, but look at this animation. Listen to this music. Go back to the house. It's bloody chilling, and a game that I was fully scared of as a child, like I said. Yeah, laugh away all you want. But this game for the time was insanely risque. I had never seen anything like it. Sure, I didn't know about the original at the time. Obviously I knew it existed, but I'd never seen it or played it. This for me, and I'm sure plenty of other Mega Drive / Genesis gamers out there, was the one that started it all. And it's a good thing too that I never played that original, because as you can no doubt see, it plays pretty much exactly like the original did. Which is actually a little bit strange, because it was actually made by the company that made the last game, rather than the first one. As you can see, the mask is quite different in this version too, with the Japanese game having a more Asian look, whereas the American and European versions of the game have a far more grinning demon style about them. If you're up for the challenge, then get the Japanese version, as it's harder, starting the game with less hearts and giving you less continues to play with. However, if you want a more enjoyable and in my opinion better looking Splatterhouse experience, then go for the American and European options. Either way, no matter what you play, you're going to have a great time with Splatterhouse 2. This, in my opinion, is without a doubt the best release in the entire series. And although that may sound like it's all downhill from here, the rest of the games are pretty good too, but we'll get to those in a minute. So, Splatterhouse 2. Sure, the game is looked at as a remake of sorts, even with the box stating that it begins again. But this time, it not only feels slightly more fluid, with more of an emphasis on platforming this time rather than just going right and killing, but it also has enemies that are a lot more varied this time, with some absolutely stunning bosses, which you've grown to expect from the series so far. I'll not go into detail about every single one, as I'll be looking at those horror movie references in a bit. But just look at this. My god, this game is stunning. Stunning in a disgusting way. So you obviously make your way back to the house, although I'm not sure exactly how, as it was burnt down at the end of the last one. But anyway, as you play the game, small amounts of text appear on the screen, keeping you up to date with the story, although it is very thin as you would expect. An elevator A secret entrance to the house? You get the idea. You eventually, with the help of your mask, open a portal and find the ghost of your dead girlfriend, who asks for help before being dragged back down to, hell, I assume? Well, after another boss, you ain't putting up with any of that as you jump into the portal right after her. More incredible music follows, and when you defeat whatever this is, you see Jennifer again. Ever have one of those nightmares where you're trying to run away from something, but no matter how fast, you just can't seem to pick up the speed? That's what this reminds me of. Anyway, you save Jennifer from a dart-throwing octopus before going up against your final boss, again with awesome as hell pumping 16-bit music, might I add. The house is destroyed once again, sinking into the lake, and Jennifer is saved from her torturous afterlife. But what of the mask? As long as that mask remains, it can happen again. And just like all good horror movies that don't know when to stop, we eventually get Splatterhouse Part 3. And it does a fantastic job at setting the scene. I'm just going to leave this intro here for you guys to watch. Talk about getting you pumped for the game. This is just so damn good. I'm sure you'll all agree. Strangely, the art style of the game has slightly changed, and although I prefer the original look of the earlier games, this is still a really nice addition to the series. Not only that, but the style of the game has also changed, which again is fine by me. Look, if you want to play a game like this, just go pick up the original or its sequel. They pretty much nailed it back then. Splatterhouse 3 has a far more Streets of Rage Golden Axe style gameplay about it, giving you the option to not only move up and down with your shrunken sprite, which helps you see more of the playing field, but thankfully it just does not stop there. You, the player, actually go through the house at your own pace and in whatever way you feel you need to. This gives the game some insane replayability as you try over and over again to get that perfect route down. And by the way, this review has absolutely no nostalgia attached to it whatsoever, which is probably the reason why I prefer those original two games in the series. Because? Why? Because I never played this as a kid, nor did I even know about it up until a few years ago, because Splatterhouse Part 3 never got a UK release. It's sad, but true. Anyway, the story goes that Rick and Jennifer are now married several years after the events of number 2, and Rick actually is quite the successful guy working on Wall Street. They have a kid now, and with his new happy family and decent income, Rick and Jennifer, in their infinite wisdom, decide to buy themselves a nice big mansion. What was they thinking? Well, the mask talks to him once more, and Rick puts it on one last time to defeat the monsters that have invaded his very own mansion, aka the new Splatterhouse. You start the game by saving Jennifer quite early on, only to find that it was all a diversion while those pesky evil monsters go and steal David, his son. You eventually save him and finally destroy the evil terror mask once and for all. Yeah. It's a pretty crazy twist from an already pretty strange game, but considering this crazy plot device is all too familiar in the horror movies that it's imitating, well, I just feel a tad more forgiving here. Splatterhouse has a free pass in that regards. Now, when you're comparing games like this to games like Streets of Rage or Double Dragon or Golden Axe or anything like that, you are going to fall short because Splatterhouse 3 does not play as well as those games. Again, it's not a bad game, and if I was going to rate it, I would probably rate it 7 out of 10. It's a perfect diversion for the series, but it's far from the best. However, what makes this game so good is that it actually has 4 different endings, giving the game even more replayability. There's the ending where Rick was unable to save both Jennifer and David, and Rick stands alone with the weight of failure hanging heavy upon him, with the final words being, "Alone, all alone." Then if you save Jennifer but not David, the game explains that he is now just a memory, and you have Jennifer asking you, "Where's David?" And if that isn't chilling enough for you, if you do save David but not Jennifer, the game tells you that she is merely a memory to Rick and David, and even has this stabbing end sequence where the young boy asks Rick, "Daddy, Where's Mummy? Cold, Splatterhouse. That is cold. And then obviously you got the ending where he saves everyone. The mask is finally destroyed, sealing the perfect end for the series as the sky turns blue and you return to your family. Actually, no matter what ending you get, the mask is destroyed, sealing the perfect end to the series no matter how well you play. If you have played the game from its first game in the arcades all the way up to this, depending on how well you play, well, it can give completely mixed feelings of happiness or even regret, as the character you have controlled and you've felt sorry for up to this point with his struggle to free his girlfriend and eventually his son can have an ending which is only shaped by your ability to play these games. An absolutely perfect ending to a trilogy of games that wraps up the story with the perfect horror decorated bow. Probably the greatest horror trilogy of all time. Now obviously the game had the previously mentioned spin-off. As you no doubt already know, it actually also got a reboot as well with 2010's Splatterhouse for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. But before we get to that, it's actually believed that this game is in fact a sequel to Wanpaku Graffiti. Haha, yes, I'm as surprised as you guys are. Simple 2000 series Volume 64, the Splatter Action, is a PlayStation 2 Japanese exclusive game that has fairly obvious inspiration taken from games like Wanpaku Graffiti. Now, inspiration really is the key word here. It's not made by the same team and it's just heavily inspired. I think it's worth mentioning the game, and honestly it plays quite nicely. A true hidden gem for the system. But really, part of the Splatterhouse franchise? No, I don't think so. So, let's move on to that remake.
Make a wish? Okay. I want us to be together until the end of the world.
Jenny, I'm sorry. He took your girl, Rick. He took your dreams. And he took your life. Dr. Henry West, MD. He took it all. Only thing you got left is your soul. And that belongs to me. Who am I? Let's just say I'm God. Your God. At least the only God that's listening right now. What do I want? Same as any God. A little faith. For without faith, I am nothing. And without me, you're fucked. She doesn't have to die. I can help you. I can heal your wounds. We can save her if you show me some faith, if you trust me, if you put me on.
Splatterhouse 2010, which I'll now call Splatterhouse because otherwise that would be ridiculous, is fairly panned by critics. And I'm here to tell you that they are wrong. Splatterhouse, even with its flaws of audio glitches and extremely repetitive gameplay, is still, in my opinion, 100% worth your time. As of the making of this video, which was literally 2 or 3 days before Halloween might I add, the game can be found on eBay for between £7 to £10. Is there a tenner's worth of enjoyment in this game? Abso-freaking-lutely. Not only does it look utterly fantastic, have a storyline that not only competes with the original games, but in some cases surpasses it, crazy amounts of references to those original games, and even has a soundtrack of metal music so heavy that it would make the likes of Metal Jesus and Alpha Mega Sin run home crying to their mummies, but it also includes the original 3 fully uncensored in all their horrific glory games. But even without those retro games being included in this one, the game still does actually get more things right than it does wrong. In my opinion, it's a 7 out of 10 game that possibly gets pushed up even higher due to the brilliant voice acting and animated sequences throughout. Thankfully the game is pretty good too. Sure, it fits into the same style of games such as Devil May Cry or God of War, and sadly just doesn't play as well as those games, but let's be honest here, those games are outstanding, and this, well, it's just a good game. It's not bad, it's just good. The story in the game is also really elaborate compared to the originals, and even answers age-old questions like what the hell is the Terror Mask and who the hell is Dr. West. On top of this, like I said, the voice acting is brilliant, thanks mainly to the work of Jim Cummings.
Nice landing. Hey, your nutsack's not fused to your chin, right? I'd consider that a successful trip.
He really does do an amazing job here. If you're not fighting bad guys, the mask is talking to you, and vice versa. Heck, sometimes they even overlap, helping to break up that repetitive gameplay that the critics really seem to hate. What is also quite cool about this is that at certain sections of the game, it goes all 2D on your ass. However, sadly these sections can sometimes actually be to the game's disadvantage. I welcome a nice change of style to the game, but they're just not as good as the obvious God of War sections. Again, they're not bad like I keep saying, but they are far from the game's highlights. If you are a fan of Splatterhouse games, which I can only assume you are considering you've made it this far into the video, you can do a lot worse than getting this game. However, if you're not a fan like me, and you want to get this as your first entry point into the series, then in that case, yes, you may start seeing the game just like those critics. But then I would still say that for £10, you're still getting your money's worth with this one. So, there you have it guys, 5 games plus ports of Splatterhouse. In my opinion, even with the earlier games' clunky controls and the later games' repetitive gameplay, they are still brilliant, mindless fun to play. It's the shock factor of seeing things on your screen that makes you stop in your tracks and think, how the hell did they get away with this in the late 80s? Well, it's probably because of the certification on games was pretty much non-existent back then. Heck, some of these game moments are even worse than what you see nowadays, in obvious games like Resident Evil, Silent Hill and Dead Space. Okay, maybe not Mortal Kombat though. Perhaps the reason for this is due to the game's source material. You know, the game's inspiration, its influences, classic horror movies. So if playing this franchise isn't enough to make you want to keep the lights on this Halloween, then maybe looking at those horror references will. So let's look at the inspiration behind the Splatterhouse franchise. Friday the 13th. So first off, the mask from the original game is obviously based on Jason's mask from Friday the 13th Part 3 to Part 9. But that's not all. Going back to Friday the 13th Part 2, you can see another reference to Jason with the boss man, Biggie Man, the Evil Dead. Obviously Biggie Man's chainsaws for hands must have come from the Evil Dead 2 movie, right? Well, that's far from the only nod to the classic series. In the 2010 remake, you got a laughing fish head, and in Splatterhouse 2, you have a vomiting ram head, which are both a reference to that laughing deer head from the movie. But of course, the biggest reference is finding Ash himself dead in Phase 4 of Splatterhouse 2010. Nightmare on Elm Street. If Ash isn't enough, Freddy Krueger's burnt corpse, represented by the glove, the old hat and a green and red jumper, which can be found near a boiler in Phase 6 of that 2010 game, should be. But on top of that, the giant ballworm strikes quite a resemblance to Freddy's snake scene from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warrior. And those are just the obvious ones. You got flying chairs, which reference films like Poltergeist, Dracula imitates Michael Jackson's Thriller that you no doubt saw earlier, and The Fly is parodied in a later level too. Facehuggers from the Alien franchise are very obviously in place here, as well as a xenomorph looking alien which can be seen on the box art of Splatterhouse 2. And finally, other than achievements named after lines from classic movies such as See You at the Party from Total Recall and You Got Red on You from Shaun of the Dead, to name a few, I will end on this one. The evil scientist Dr. Henry West is believed to be taken straight from Dr. Herbert West from the classic movie Reanimator. It seems that the guys over at Namco really went to town researching this stuff, and it shows. The obvious nod to these movies are brilliantly well done, and you'll have a hard time finding another game that shows this much respect to the classic horror movies of old. And on that note, that brings us to the end of the Splatterhouse complete history. I think you guys have got quite a lot to go on here. Crazy amount of good horror movies and a good 5 or 6 Splatterhouse related video games. Obviously, like I said, the easiest way is just to buy that 2010 remake, as it almost acts as a complete collection for the series. Either way, no matter what game you decide to play in this franchise, you're pretty much going to be guaranteed a good time. The Splatterhouse series has always stuck with me, and it was one of the first franchises that I was requested to do, and it was also one of the first franchises that I wanted to do. So if you're up for a good horror franchise to play this Halloween, why not help Rick save his wife and eventually his son in the mansion of Dr. West, aka the Splatterhouse. Hey guys, thanks for checking out my video. If you want to check out some more of my videos, click the links that you see at the top of the screen. If you haven't already, please rate, favourite, comment and subscribe. And if you want to support the show that little bit extra, come and check me out over on Patreon. This is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.